Britannia, is a British patriotic song, originating from the poem Rule, Britannia by James Thompson and set to music by Thomas Arne in 1740. It is strongly associated with the Royal Navy, but also used by the British Army. Original Masque. This British national air was originally included in Alfred, a masque about Alfred the Great, co-written by Thompson and David Mallet and first performed at Cliveden, country home of Frederick, Prince of Wales, on the 1st of August 1740, to commemorate the accession of George II and the third birthday of the Princess Augusta. Frederick, a German prince who arrived in England as an adult and was on very bad terms with his father, was making considerable efforts to ingratiate himself and build a following among his subjects to be a masque linking the prince with both the medieval hero King Alfred the Great's victories over the Vikings and with the current building of British sea power, exemplified by the recent successful capture of Portobello from the Spanish by Admiral Vernon on the 21st of November 1739, avenging in the eyes of the British public Admiral Hosier's disastrous blockade of Portobello of 1726–27 went well with his political plans and aspirations. Thompson was a Scottish poet and playwright who spent most of his adult life in England and hoped to make his fortune at court. He had an interest in helping foster a British identity, including and transcending the older English, Irish, Welsh and Scottish identities. Thompson had written the tragedy of Sophonisba, based on the historical figure of Sophonisba, a proud princess of Carthage, a major sea power of the ancient world, who had committed suicide rather than submit to slavery at the hands of the Romans. This might have some bearing on the song's famous refrain, "Britons never will be slaves." Incidentally, Thompson wrote the word never only once, but it has been popularly corrupted to never, 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 possibly because it is actually easier to sing. The same theme was repeated in the Navy's own Heart of Oak, written 2 decades later. "To honor we call you, as freemen not slaves, for who are so free as the sons of the waves." In 1751 Mallet altered the lyrics, omitting 3 of the original 6 stanzas and adding 3 others, written by Lord Bolingbroke. This version, known as "Married to a Mermaid," became extremely popular when Mallet produced his Masque of Britannia at Drury Lane Theatre in 1755. Independent history. The song soon developed an independent life of its own, separate from the masque of which it had formed a part. First heard in London in 1745, it achieved instant popularity. It quickly became so well known that Handel quoted it in his occasional oratorio in the following year. Handel used the first phrase as part of the Act 2 soprano aria, "Prophetic Visions Strike My Eye." When the soprano sings it at the words, "War shall cease, welcome peace." Similarly, "Rule, Britannia," was seized upon by the Jacobites, who altered Thompson's words to a pro-Jacobite version. However, Thompson's original words remained best known. Their denunciation of foreign tyrants has some foundation, as Great Britain's period of parliamentary commonwealth had decisively curbed royal prerogative, leading to the Bill of Rights of 1689, and it was on the way to developing its constitutional monarchy, in marked contrast to the royal absolutism still prevalent in Europe. Britain and France were at war for much of the century and hostile in between, and the French Bourbons were undoubtedly the prime example of haughty tyrants, whose slaves Britons should never be, according to Armitage rule. Britannia was the most lasting expression of the conception of Britain and the British Empire that emerged in the 1730s, predicated on a mixture of adulterated mercantilism, nationalistic anxiety and libertarian fervour. He equates the song with Bolingbroke's On the Idea of a Patriot King, also written for the private circle of Frederick, Prince of Wales, in which Bolingbroke had raised the spectre of permanent standing armies that might be turned against the British people rather than their enemies. Hence British naval power could be equated with civil liberty. Since an island nation with a strong navy to defend, it could afford to dispense with a standing army which, since the time of Cromwell, was seen as a threat and a source of tyranny. At the time it appeared the song was not a celebration of an existing state of naval affairs, but an exhortation. Although the Dutch Republic, which in the 17th century presented a major challenge to English sea power, was obviously past its peak by 1745, Britain did not yet rule the waves, although, since it was written during the War of Jenkinsia, it could be argued that the words referred to the alleged Spanish aggression against British merchant vessels that caused the war. The time was still to come when the Royal Navy would be an unchallenged dominant force on the oceans. The jesting lyrics of the mid-18th century would assume a material and patriotic significance by the end of the 19th century. The melody was the theme for a set of variations for piano by Ludwig van Beethoven, and he also used it in Wellington's Victory, Op. 91. Richard Wagner wrote a concert overture in D major based on the theme in 1837. Johann Strauss quoted the song in full as the introduction to his 1838 waltz, Huldigung der Königin Victoria von Großbritannien, Op. 103, where he also quotes the British national anthem, God Save the Queen, at the end of the piece. The French organist-composer Alexandre Guilmant included this tune in his Fantaisie sur des Mélodies Anglaises for organ, Op. 43, where he also makes use of the song Home, Sweet Home. Arthur Sullivan, Britain's leading composer during the reign of Queen Victoria, quoted from Rule Britannia on at least 3 occasions in music for his comic operas written with W. S. Gilbert and Bolton Rowe. In Utopia Limited, Sullivan used airs from Rule Britannia to highlight references to Great Britain. In The Zoo, Sullivan applied the tune of Rule Britannia to an instance in which Rowe's libretto quotes directly from the Patriotic March. Finally, to celebrate the Jubilee of Queen Victoria in 1887, Sullivan added a chorus of Rule Britannia to the finale of HMS Pinafore, which was playing in revival at the Savoy Theatre. Sullivan also quoted the tune in his 1897 ballet Victoria and Merry England, which traced the history of England from the time of the Druids up to Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, an event the ballet was meant to celebrate. The part of the tune's refrain on the word never is among those claimed to have provided the theme on which Edward Elgar's Enigma variations are based. Elgar also quotes the opening phrase of Rule Britannia in his choral work The Music Makers, based on Arthur O'Shaughnessy's ode at the line We Fashion an Empire's Glory, where he also quotes Le Marseillaise. Rule Britannia is traditionally performed at the BBC's last night of the proms, normally with a guest soloist. It has always been the last part of Sir Henry Wood's Fantasia on British sea songs, except that for many years up until 2000, the Sargent arrangement has been used. However, in recent years the inclusion of the song and other patriotic tunes has been much criticised, notably by Leonard Slatkin, and the presentation has been occasionally amended. For some years the performance at the last night of the proms reverted to Sir Henry Wood's original arrangement. When Bryn Terfel performed it at the proms in 1994 and 2008, he sang the third verse in Welsh. The text is available at Rule Britannia. Rule Britannia is often written as simply Rule Britannia, erroneously omitting both the comma and the exclamation mark, which changes the interpretation of the lyric by altering the grammar. Richard Dawkins recounts in The Selfish Gene that the repeated exclamation, Rule Britannia, Britannia, rule the waves, is often rendered as Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves, changing both the meaning and inflection of the verse. This addition of a terminal s to the lyrics is used as an example of a successful meme. Morris Wilson Disher notes that the change from Britannia, rule the waves, to Britannia rules the waves occurred in the Victorian era, at a time when the British did rule the waves and no longer needed to be exhorted to rule them. Disher also notes that the Victorians changed will to shall in the line, Britons never shall be slaves. Original lyrics. This version is taken from the works of James Thompson by James Thompson, published 1763, Volume 2, p. 191, which includes the entire original text of Alfred. 1. When Britain first, at heaven's command, arose from out the azure main, this was the charter of the land, and guardian angels sang this strain, Rule Britannia, rule the waves, Britons never will be slaves. 2. The nations, not so blessed as thee, must, in the turns, to tyrants fall, while thou shalt flourish great and free, the dread and envy of them all. Rule Britannia, rule the waves, Britons never will be slaves. 3. Still more majestic shalt thou rise, more dreadful from each foreign stroke, as the loud blast that tears the skies, serves but to root thy native oak. Rule Britannia, rule the waves, Britons never will be slaves. 4. The haughty tyrants ne'er shall tame, all their attempts to bend thee down, will but arouse thy generous flame, but work the woe, and thy renown. Rule Britannia, rule the waves, Britons never will be slaves. 5. To thee belongs the rural reign, thy cities shall with commerce shine, all thine shall be the subject main, and every shore it circles thine. Rule Britannia, rule the waves, Britons never will be slaves. 6. The Muses, still with freedom found, shall to thy happy coast repair, blessed isle, with matchless beauty crowned, and manly hearts to guard the fair. Rule Britannia, rule the waves, Britons never will be slaves. Lyrics as sung. Although the lyrics are usually set out as above, the lines are set to the music as sung in contemporary time according to either of the following variants. Traditionally rendered, when Britain first, at heaven's command, arose from out the azure main, arose from out the azure main, this was the charter of the land, and guardian angels sang this strain, Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, Britons never shall be slaves. Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, Britons never shall be slaves. The nations, no so blessed as thee, must in the turn, to tyrants fall, must in the turn, to tyrants fall, while thou shalt flourish great and free, the dread and envy of them all. Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, Britons never shall be slaves. Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, Britons never shall be slaves. And now commonly rendered in alternate form, when Britain first, at heaven's command, arose from out the azure main, arose from out the azure main, this was the charter of the land, and guardian angels sang this strain, Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, Britons never will be slaves. Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, Britons never will be slaves. Still more majestic shalt thou rise, more dreadful from each foreign stroke, more dreadful from each foreign stroke. Loud blast above us, loud blast that tears the skies, serves but to row thy native oak. Rule Britannia, Britannia, rule the waves. Britons never will be slaves. Rule Britannia, Britannia, rule the waves. Britons never will be slaves. Variations. Never is sometimes sung as a single never over the same melodic phrase, this being the original arrangement by Arne. Bibliography.